And I am the VP for Marketing and Communications for NCJW. Some of you may know me as former roles was the Chief Marketing Officer at the Jewish Federation. I worked for the Alley Theater as well and had the same role at Music Grand Opera and the Symphony. So lots of performing arts. So I met Stephanie through the performing arts and had no idea that she had a life other than a theater life. So today I am your moderator and here so that I could ask some questions so that we could learn about the work that these two extraordinary ladies have done and continue to do. So Stephanie, we all know about the drug addiction crisis in America, but can you set the stage? Explain to us, what is the magnitude of this?
Okay, here's some numbers. We've lost 400,000 people since 1999. Every single year since 1999, the numbers have gone up and up and up and up and up. The last year that we have data on record for is 2017, and there were around 50,000 opioid-related deaths in 2017, more than car accidents. So it has surpassed the number of car accidents. That's the data. The thing about it is that, like, it's hard to process what that is. It's hard to process 400,000. And so what my mom and I are very committed to doing in each of our ways is to talk about the human toll that this has taken. So every single, how many people are in this room? Like 150? So like divide 400,000 by 150, that's the impact of the opioid crisis. You know, if you can visualize that, it's astounding. And so it's not okay at this point to just go, well, you know, that sucks. And no one can seem to get anywhere. And so a lot of the work that I have been doing, mostly against my will over the last year, has been to try to find a solution. And it's going to take a lot of different things. But you know, if you look at something like HIV or something that had a lot of stigma around it, and now we have, you know, people are living long, healthy lives, and that's really what we want to do with the opioid crisis. We want to get to a point where we're changing the framework of it, making it a disease, making it something that has effective treatment, something that's not shrouded in mystery, something that is not, you're a failure, you pick yourself up by the bootstraps. We have to get away from that and look at it under a disease framework. And so my goal right now is to just educate as many people as I can.
I think that a lot of people, perhaps not people in this room, but a lot of people have an image of what somebody on opioids and addiction and heroin addiction, what they look like. And so Harris was a very functioning addict. Some people who knew him very well might not have known that this was sort of running his life in some ways. So Harris invented the word humble brag, so some people know that. But he was an amazing and astonishing creative comic. So Maureen, if you could talk a little bit about sort of what is a functioning addict? What does that mean? I'm a functioning addict.
Yeah, is this on? You got to talk into it.
Thank you. First of all, let me say that I do have notes. It's all in her head, but I'm old. So there's that. Harris, you know, I really only knew about his disease for about a year. But prior to that, he was, you know, setting the world on fire with stuff. And I sort of noticed in years before that the light was going out of his eyes. And I honestly attributed that to, oh, he's just so busy in Hollywood. He's fine, just needs some rest. So that's what a highly functioning addict is.
So talk a little bit about GRASP.
Okay. can I back it up with the year of 2014? Yes. Okay, this is where it all comes together.
This is your story.
The year 2014 was the year from hell for me. My first beautiful, gorgeous granddaughter was born with hearing loss, and I sort of had to be there for that. Stephanie and Mike were put on a medical path that was horrible, trying to find out what had happened. Also that year, I found out that my son had an SUD, substance use disorder. He had to be put on the back burner because I was with them. He went into several rehabs that year, and I was able to get on board for the middle one, which was the Hazelton Betty Ford Center in Oregon. I went up for Family Week, and I needed to learn how to take care of Harris and also myself while he was going through this. I assured him that I was 100% in from that point, and he knew of my unwavering love. He knew it, so I was there for him. This is what happened after Harris died. It was in 2015, also a devastating year. I went into this horrible, deep, dark hole from devastation and shock. And then I started to emerge a few months later, and I started hearing his voice in my head going, "Mom, you gotta get out there and scream your story and advocate for me." And out of that came GRASP, which is Grief Recovery After Substance Passing. My wonderful friend Kay went online looking for some support for me, and she came upon it online. And there was no support like this in Houston for something so specific as an overdose death. So I interviewed and started the Houston chapter. It was 4.5 years ago. That started with 5 people that first night, and now I can have anywhere from 15 to 22 come in a night, and that's horrific. So I have asked my GRASP members also to scream their stories, because that is all we've got. That is what we can do to help. We also, there was a man going around the country filming documentaries of families that had lost loved ones. So I called him, I arranged for him to come to Houston, and several of my GRASP members interviewed for that documentary. He is now shopping it all over the country to be in all the schools. And from my standpoint, I think early education and true facts are crucial to put a dent in this thing. That's it.
So let's talk about a couple of facts, because I think that there's a belief. You said pull yourself up by your bootstraps. There are people who believe you're an addict, just quit. And that kind of solution, it has not been so effective. So what are some more practical solutions? What if you could play this again, what would it look like?
Well, it's funny. It's not funny. I have a podcast called Last Day where we talk about the opioids crisis, and my mom was on an episode a few weeks ago where we were just sort of having a conversation in the kitchen, and I started the show with the idea that I did everything that I could do, that I, knew what I knew at the time, which is that we need to send him to a 30-day treatment center. That's the model. You have this thing, you go to a rehab, you get sober. But what I didn't know at the time is everything that I know now, which is that in a lot of cases, if you go to a 30-day treatment center and you come out, you are more vulnerable at that moment than you have ever been before. And that now that you are that vulnerable, your tolerance is non-existent. So if you try to then use at the rate that you were using before you went in, that causes tons of overdose deaths. You also see this with people coming out of prison. You see this with any sort of thing where there is a cold turkey kind of withdrawal process that happens. AA is something that we are going to talk about extensively on the show this week. It did not work for Harris. It does not work for many people that have substance use disorders. We have a amazing access right now to medication-assisted treatment. So methadone, Suboxone, buprenorphine, medications that you would take, like if you take every day a thyroid pill. Take my thyroid pill and it keeps my thyroid normal. It's like you have a substance use disorder, every day you take your pill and it helps to keep your addiction tempered. I just know so much more now about possibilities, and the thing is, there's not, like any disease, there is not a one-size-fits-all approach. You are not going to go, well, here's the manual for how to fix your disease. You have to work with your doctor, and they do exist, addiction medicine doctors. They are board certified. It's a growing field. You work with your doctor, you work with your therapist, you work with your body chemistry to figure out what's the best program for you. Lots of people are having success now at outpatient facilities, methadone clinics, outpatient buprenorphine clinics. You know, there's a stigma around some of this stuff that is, pardon my French, bullshit. Because it's like a stigma around somebody who had cancer and is taking medication to treat their cancer. I mean, it's like absolutely ridiculous. So there's this like, well, if you're taking medicine, you're not totally sober, but you would never say that to anyone else with another disease. So there are options now. Going back to the conversation I had with my mom at the table, I was saying, why didn't we do more? Why didn't we know more? And she said, I did what the experts told me to do, which at the time was send your kid to rehab. And then my dad told me the other day, we fight about everything constantly. It's our love language. And he's like, this is the frustrating thing about medicine, is that something will happen, some sort of innovation or some sort of breakthrough will happen. And you're too late, right? You couldn't take advantage of that thing. Your person's already gone. And there's a real frustration in knowing now what I know and being unable to do what I could have done now, right? So it's like, it's easy to sort of go, oh, we screwed it up. We didn't do it right. But it's not the whole story, because we knew what we knew when we knew it. And my mission for my show is to help people like us who had no idea what to do, who are loving, connected, committed family members who want to provide support and assistance and just don't have the manual for it. And then, so like getting all the stigma out of the way, getting the shame out of the way, that doesn't help anybody, and then trying to figure out how to actually attack the problem.
So I think that these are, within this room, I think this all sounds very reasonable, but these are considered progressive, radical approaches.
I mean, I didn't even tell you the progressive ones. Well, if you want.
I think that it's very important that we, as progressives, that we think about this and we think about how we talk about abuse and solutions. We don't say stuff like, well, why don't they just quit? That's sort of a fundamental thing that we can all do, whether whether we know somebody. But when we hear stories, it's very important that we're supported in the right way.
Well, I think the other issue, I'm not trying to make this about me, Mom, okay, I'll give you the mic in a second, but I just feel like the other issue is like, there is this model of like the intervention model, right? We all love that TV show. Harris and I love that TV show. If you do not go get help today, we're done with you. Go to the curb. That does not help. That is also not helpful to anybody. So, like if you're sitting here right now and you're struggling with something, I would say like the first thing is stay connected. Being disconnected is not going to help. It's going to be frustrating. And the problem is the symptoms of addiction or that you're kind of an asshole. That's the symptom of addiction, because you have to take your drugs. And in order to take your drugs, you need to lie, you need to steal, you need to deny, because your body is saying, if I don't get the drugs, I'm going to die. It's like if you're hungry and you need food for your family, you're going to get it. You're going to rob a store and get food. We have to shift to that. And so if you're saying, if you don't do what I say right now, you're out, well, you need it. What do you want to do right now? What can we do together right now? And they're going to fail 100 times. You talk to anyone in recovery, they're going to tell you failure is part of it. It's a part of the disease. It's just like any of your kids. You're all, I can tell, there's a room full of wonderful parents here. If your kid fails, you're not going to be like, well, gotta go, kid. You failed, you're out of here. So, I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm okay.
That's okay. I'm now going to talk to Maureen for a minute. So, I can't.
Steve, will you bring me my shawl? It's freezing.
You should bring me my shawl. Hang on 1 second. Here.
Okay, Rose.
Okay. We're going to get a shawl, and then we're going to get to it. So, I think that to...
This is my father-in-law.
So to begin to heal and to begin to understand, I just find that it requires tremendous bravery and compassion, all the things that we talk about when we say women of influence. But I have heard a story about you, Maureen, from high school, where you learned bravery, perhaps.
In 1968, my synagogue in Meridian, Mississippi was bombed. And my father was very vocal about finding people who had done this. And he went national. It was national news. And the FBI, thank God, had an informant in the Klan. And they literally had to move my neighborhood out for a week because they didn't know when it was going to happen. So they were there in my yard every night waiting for this to happen. And a young woman, 24 years old, and a young man, 20, came to my house with 29 sticks of dynamite, headed to my parents' bedroom window, and there was a shootout. The young woman was killed. And by the way, her husband did not even know she was in the Klan. Can you imagine? And the young man went to prison for a very long time. So my mother begged my father to leave Mississippi at that time. And he said, no way, my roots are here, my business is here, we're staying. And he said, I feel like we're being watched and taken care of. And sure enough, things did calm down after that quite a bit. So if that had happened, Stephanie would not be sitting here today. Okay.
That's the takeaway.
The takeaway is, I think, that things that happen to us can make us stronger. And finding those ways is what GRASP is about. So, Stephanie, you are finding another way. So you started Lemonada. Lemonada Media, and when I heard that you were going to do this, I thought, okay, she's going to make a podcast about herself. And then I realized, oh no, she's launching a business. So talk a little bit about the big Lemonada and then Last Day In.
Okay, I'm tired. That's where I'll start. But
that's what entrepreneurs look like.
Yes, exactly. We did this totally by accident. I did not have a big lifelong goal of having a podcast network or media company. But my life at least has been very windy in that way, and I kind of go where the things take me, and I read my book and this is what happened. Sorry. I'm going to backtrack here. We went on a podcast. My mom and I went on a podcast. There's a show called Terrible Thanks for Asking. I don't know if you've heard it. It's a fabulous show about terrible things that happen to you. And I told my mom to take a listen to it, and she wrote in and said, I have a story. And they were like, okay, come on the show. And then my mom wrote me and said, come on the show with me. And I said, I don't want to. And she's like, okay, fine. And I was like, okay, fine. And so we went and did the show. And thank God she made me, because the woman who hosted the show has become a dear friend. But more importantly, there was a woman who heard the show. And she had lost her brother 3 months before. And she had saved the episode that my mom and I were on for a walk. She lives in Minneapolis, and she said it was the first time that she had smiled in 3 months, listening to the fact that we were there in a studio together, laughing, still crying, and it was a horrible thing, but that we were able to be human still. And she figured out where I was, and she produced a show called Pod Save the People with DeRay McKesson on Crooked Media. And she emailed me and said, let's meet. And I was 1 month away at this point, 1 week away, from giving birth to Harrison, my son. I was very giant. And I remember we got on and she was like, do you want to come on Pod Save the People to talk about opioids? And I said, yeah, but I'm really pregnant. And so, give me a minute and then let's circle back in a few months. And then at the end of the call, she said, by the way, I have this crazy idea for a podcast about the opioids crisis. Would you want to do that? And I was like, no, I don't actually. I'm sort of opioided out. But we'll talk later, Good to meet you. And a few months later, I read an article that opioids are killing more people than car accidents. And I emailed her right then and I said, let's do it, because it's not up to me. We have this story to tell, like my mom said, and this sucks, and I don't want any other family to be going through this. And so we started, and once we started working on Last Day, we thought, you know what, people's lives suck in a variety of ways, not just this one, and so what if we create content and community around all the things that are hard, and all the things that make it hard to get out of bed. And that's sort of the root of Lemonada, making lemonade from lemons. And so all of our shows have to do with, I'm like a glass half empty kind of girl. I wouldn't call it a self-help kind of a network, but it's about humanity and empathy building and trying to make the world just as it is, mildly better,
I think that the tone of the podcasts are very real. And I think that you come to that as an actor, and showing authenticity is key to being convincing as an actor. And I think that if you haven't heard any of these podcasts, I think they're fantastic. I've listened.
Thank you.
I want to. You had mentioned, Maureen had mentioned that you have a child. You have 2 children with varying degrees of hearing loss and deafness. So most parents would do what they could for their children, but that's not what you did.
No. No. Hearing aids aren't covered by insurance. I'm sure many people in this room have had this experience. And they are very expensive. They're tiny computers, and so they break, every 3 to 5 years like regular computers do, and they cost $6,000, $8,000 per pair. And so essentially you are given this diagnosis as a parent. We found out our first daughter had hearing loss when she was 24 hours old. And then you say, well, what do we do? And they say, do X, Y, and Z. And then we say, okay, so the recommendation is to get her into technology, great. And then they say, yes, and you're gonna have to pay for it. Because hearing aids are considered cosmetic. And I don't know if you've ever seen hearing aids on a baby, but wouldn't be my cosmetic choice to make. So I thought that was insane, and I have a problem with injustice and sitting in injustice. And me and 2 other moms were like, yeah, we're not gonna, this is crazy, let's change the law. And so we did in Texas. So we fought for So it took 6 years in total. I got on board the second round, and the person who had really spearheaded it the first round ended up having cancer, terrible cancer. She's still here, she's good, she took care of herself, and she's in remission and doing really well, but she couldn't really be involved in the second battle. You know, legislation in Texas happens every 2 years, and you've got a 6-month window to do it. So we spent a couple of years gearing up, and we started, Harris died in February, and I think I started working on it in, like I signed a petition in March, and then I started working on it in May. Because that's just how I have to process grief, is to do things in it. And it gave me like a place to do it, you know? I was like, this is unfair. I can't bring my brother back. I'll fight this battle. And we did. And it was hard and incredible. And I learned so much about how our system works by doing it. But now, from 2017 on, in Texas, any kid under 18 is covered for cochlear implants and hearing aids.
I want to wrap up, but I want to give you guys a chance to say anything else that you would like. I know she's got notes, so I don't know what her notes say.
I'll try to say this really fast. After Harris died, I was in a dark hole. And I went to Emmanuel, to our brilliant Rabbi Hayom, for counseling. And I told him that I did not have any faith anymore, and I didn't think it was ever coming back. And he looked at me and said something that made so much sense. He said, perhaps your advocating can now be your religion. And I grabbed it, and I went with it. And out of that came grasp, and I have 2 perfect, adorable grandchildren who breathe life into me every single day. And I have the most amazing daughter and son-in-law, who I love dearly, who have the strongest and most loving marriage I've ever seen to get through all of this.
And here he is, in a room of women.
And that beautiful marriage makes me very happy. Coming to that. Excuse me. There's Ellison. And I want to give him a shout out. The shout out is, he is responsible for what I'm wearing today. So thank you, Ellison. I heard something after Harris died, and it goes like this. Happiness is not what you have, it's appreciating what you have. And that really resonated with me. My joys are now magnified, way before they were when Harris was alive. And I had to reinvent myself. I had to learn to live in a life without Harris in it. So it was a new life. It wasn't a new normal. It was just a new life. It was a new me. I'm not that girl anymore. So through all of this, I have gained a lot of strength. And just remember one thing. It's really important. Hug and love your people every day, because none of us are promised a tomorrow.
I don't think I can follow that.
So,
Thank you.
so I will, they're here, so you can come talk to them if you want to, but I have to say that this was the easiest interview I have ever done, and I've done some with actors that are really challenging. So this is just absolutely a delight, and Maureen, you have so much to tell for, it's just beautiful. And Stephanie, you're a rock star. So thank you so much for coming.